The show, Tempus Blue. This show has been a really engaging production to put together this year. You know, when we're talking through it, and I finally get like the game plan from Dave and Scott and the program coordinators and overall show designers. You know, this show just really felt like a show that we can do and something that we can bring to the table that would be hard for a lot of other groups to do, at least do it the way we do. One of the things that's interesting about this show is the evolution of the use of the color blue through history. And as the color blue has proliferated through like, you know, Asian culture and traveled from like, you know, the lapis lazuli all the way to like the applications in Europe and all the journeys along the way, you know, there's different musical flavors and there's different stylistic interpretations of each of those styles along the way. So part of that is represented through things we do with like the sound design and the use of like the poem that is central to our theme. But also another part of that is just all the integration of those flavors and those styles musically into the way we construct the book. So when you listen to the front ensemble book and the musical book, you're going to hear some of that evolution in the instrumentation we use. You're going to hear kind of a far off, distant land sense of instrumentation orchestration at the beginning of the show. And then as we kind of progress through time with the evolution of the color blue through art history, you'll kind of hear that evolve in the way we use it musically. You know, as we get into the Renaissance area, you'll start to hear like the cathedral organ, the pipe organ. It kind of throws you back to that medieval times or that early cathedral ages. And then finally, as we get into the more modern applications like the Picasso blue period or the Ives Klein, you start to really get more of a sense of like the modern taste of things. And that's where I feel like the role of the Blue Devils kind of starts to become so integrated with the color blue and the way it's kind of evolved in our interpretation of it over time. You also start to hear some flavors of things that we've done in the past, and some of them are so subtle that you may not notice it. It's just a little color, or it's just a little timbre, or it's just a little tiny flavor of a percussion idea. But there's all these little Easter eggs hidden throughout the show that are kind of a little bit of a tribute to this organization and all the amazing people who not only have been in my position and have been able to kind of voice things for the front ensemble, but also musically, so much has been brought to the table over the last 40, 50, 65 years that the Blue Devils have been in existence. The color blue, well, I mean, it's always existed. You could always look up at the sky and see it, but man's ability to recreate and utilize it's not a pigment that exists very naturally or very frequently in nature. I believe, you know, don't check me against a history book, but you know, early on, the lapis lazuli and the color blue was something really rare. It had to be mined, it had to be found in far off and distant places. So the application of it and the usage of it is special, and the way it was used in art throughout time reflects how unique it was and how rare it was, and that kind of gives it a special place in the way you see the color blue when you walk through an art museum and you see how rare it was, and because of the rarity, the specific applications and the meaning or the purpose of those specific applications and why it was so important to use that, and why, if it's such a rare thing and a rare pigment that's so hard to come across historically, why was it chosen for this style of artwork or this as it began to proliferate. So, you know, it's not that it didn't exist. Those colors always existed in nature, but man's usage of them and man's access to them is definitely something that's changed and evolved in our early history. You know, for me, it's been an evolution. I've been with the Blue Devils since 2009, and every year, just the responsibilities have gone up. You know, for example, at the beginning of my time, I was purely a front ensemble technician. And then at some point over the last 10, 15 years, a front ensemble technician became also an electronics specialist, okay? And then as my role started to grow and my time with the Corps started to increase, then I kind of started to take on more of the management responsibilities. In 2017, I took over the role as caption head of the front ensemble and started just dealing with managing the personnel, managing the staff, all the logistics that go into getting this group on the road. And then 2018 was the first year that I took over creatively and kind of started to get my hands in writing the book and crafting things with Dave Glide. And now I feel like at this point, a lot of my job is also not just dealing with the front ensemble and the electronics, but also kind of taking music from the brass, from the battery percussion, and just putting the whole thing together and making sure that we're all on the same page. So, you know, I'm kind of the last layer of writing and design that goes on the show musically. So my job a lot of the time is just making sure we're catching all the pieces and making sure that everything is coordinated so that everything I do reflects that coordination. The composition of the front ensemble this year is very similar to how it was in the past. In 2019, we had 15 performers in the front ensemble. We were granted by the powers that be within our organization 2 extra electronics performers. One was our violinist, Sean Chen, and the other is our guitarist, Mario. You know, the performers here, what their responsibility is they take what we write and they bring it to life. You know, for me, a lot of the work I do during the season is done for months before we see the performers, months before we get into the camp season. And it's really once you see it in their hands, and once you see them express the written book through their own words, you watch them perform it, you watch the way that they characterize it, the body language, the way they interpret the music. And so for the performer, their job is to kind of interpret my intent, but also they bring it to life in a way that inspires me and pushes the whole thing in different directions. And part of the process for me is like feeling out the personality of this group and feeling out, you know, the strengths and weaknesses. The front ensemble performers, you have to be multifaceted. You can't just play a mallet instrument. In this season, you can't just play a violin. You have to be able to do a few things. Every one of our performers has multiple responsibilities. Our mallet players, they're always having to learn new skill sets. They're having to learn areas of percussion that are outside of what got them here as keyboard players, and they have to learn to become concert percussionists at times of the show. They have to learn to become hand percussionists and world percussionists at parts of the show. So the performers in the front ensemble have a lot of responsibility placed on them, but there's so much maturity and so much experience, and they're so adaptable and teachable that it's easy to get them to learn and try these new things because they are fearless. So that's been a really enjoyable part of crafting with this particular group. But the writing process for me is a multi-layered one. You know, the first layer of the writing process for me is what I do with Dave Glide, which is the front ensemble book, like the mallet parts, the drum set, like the actual parts that the musicians are playing. And that's like the first layer of the process. We start kind of putting that together in the fall, end of the fall, and through the winter as we go through our camp season. And then what happens once the written book is done is that we start assembling and building all these layers of electronics, sound design, main stage programming, customization, and you know, that's a process that I don't really think there's like a finish date. I think that the last opportunity for us to move chess pieces around is a few minutes before our last run through on DCI Finals Day. But until then, I don't really think of the show as being done anymore because it just makes me feel bad when we go back and start adjusting things every single day. So it's kind of a multi-pronged process, and it goes on for several months. But you know, now we're at this point of the season where the show is done, the content is done, the performers have it in their hands, and they're grasping all the things that they bring to the table. And around that, we're going to keep producing it, we're going to keep upgrading it, we're going to keep massaging it all the way to the end of the season.